Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. My name is Constance, and in my last video I was a bit angry, emotional, upset, all the things. A little bit of a rant video. I mean, not a whole lot. You know, I had my moment of self-pity, and now it is time to put the boots on and get to work and fix the situation. This week I had different videos planned. I have a bourbon banana bread recipe that I was going to share on Wednesday. I have another recipe that I need to share, and I just have been kind of waylaid on what I had planned on doing for my videos because of what happened. And in case you missed that video, I discovered that my brand new garden beds that I had just built this year, just planted, were contaminated with an herbicide, most likely Grazon. And I was so frustrated. I received a lot of questions. Many of the questions were asked over and over by a lot of people. And so I'm just going to kind of go over the most asked questions here in this video. And then I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do to fix this situation. And then I'm going to get to work. So the first question that I had many times is, what is Grazon? Grazon is a very specific kind of herbicide, and it is very commonly used in industrial agriculture. I'll just call it that. Big ag. Many farmers use it for weed control in crop fields, specifically crops that are grasses like hay or corn and things like that. It's used to control plant growth around fence lines. It's got a lot of purposes. It used to be that you had to have a license to even purchase it because it's so powerful. However, I know you can walk right into Tractor Supply or a farmer's co-op and just walk up and buy it. It's like Roundup, but worse. It's bad stuff, just like Roundup. One of the biggest problems with the Grazon, with this particular herbicide, is it lasts a long time. And when you have hay, animal feed, animal fodder, that has been sprayed with this Grazon, it's now in the plants, on the plants. You feed it to your animals eat it, and technically, officially, it's not harmful to animals. However, it's an herbicide. It's a poison. It's a chemical. Do you want your animals eating it? Do you want to eat it? I don't trust it, and do we know what the long-term effects are, really? So theoretically, my animals are fine because they ate the Grazon laced hay, but them eating it doesn't break it down. It going through their system, coming out the other end as manure. I compost the manure so that it's broken down, it's not hot or anything like that, but the Grazon is still in there. And you know, because I had a few people wondering what compost I had used in my garden beds. It was my own. I've been making my own compost for years, using the animal manure, using the clean out from the chicken coop, using my kitchen scraps and all of that. I've made my own compost for years. I don't have to buy it anymore because I make it, and I've never had an issue. However, Grazon contamination is so widespread, it is so prevalent, that it's not just people like me who are affected by it, people who make their own compost, because there are many compost businesses, nurseries, who've also had this same thing. They think they're getting hay that is not sprayed. They're told it's hay that is not sprayed, or that it's manure that is not come from hay that was sprayed, and yet they end up with Grazon contaminated manure that is composted There's even Jess at Roots and Refuge. A couple years ago, she had something like this happen. She got her compost for her brand new high tunnel on their farm they had just bought. She got her compost from an organic supplier. So it's not even, just commercial run-of-the-mill compost that people are having this problem with. It's people who are trying to get the good stuff, chemical free, no garbage in what they're doing. They don't want to bring that to their farm, to their garden, to their homestead, because one of the most important key things about homesteading and gardening is to grow your own healthy food. You know where it comes from, you know what's in it and what shouldn't be in it. And so this is a widespread problem. And from what I read, there's only one state that's made Grazon illegal, and that is Vermont. Somebody said something about Oregon, but I didn't see anything about Oregon making it illegal. It may be there, it could just be that the article I read was outdated. But for the most part, I know that it is widespread legal through most of the country. I had a bunch of people talk about, contacting their congressman, go to the authorities, go to, whatever. But here's the problem. Big Ag has a lot of lobbyists. Chemical companies who make this stuff, they've got gazillions of dollars for lobbying lawmakers. And the chances of something actually changing and something actually being done about this, realistically, is probably pretty slim. Could it happen? There's always a chance, but I'm not going to get my hopes up. In the meantime, we've still got soil, land that's contaminated with this curse, and it's still got to be dealt with. Because even if it was made illegal tomorrow, we've still got countless acres of land all over the country that are contaminated with it. So how do we deal with it? We're going to have to try and figure out how to deal with it on our own. As homesteaders, as gardeners, what can we do? Now, another question that I was asked was, how do you know it was Grazon? I don't know 100% that it was specifically Grazon, but it was most definitely some sort of herbicide. Grazon is just the most commonly used one. It's the one that is a widespread problem, and so it's kind of like the default for it. But what was happening with my plants, if you watched my Wednesday video to the very end, I walked through the garden and I showed you what was happening with the plants. And what was happening with my plants was textbook Grazon/herbicide poisoning. And I've still got a tote back here with plants that I had pulled out. All right. Now, before I go into this, there are insect-borne illnesses that your garden plants can get affected by that have a kind of similar outcome as the herbicide poisoning. However, it's not as widespread, and it's usually going to only affect a few plants, or say one kind of plant. Several years ago, I had a tomato virus that was brought in by aphids, and it affected some of my tomato plants. The tomato plants did not look healthy. They weren't looking great. However, they still produced. They still produced lots of tomatoes. But it only affected a few plants and in one bed. And if you saw my gardens in Alabama, I had two big gardens, and so I would have tomatoes in different areas of the garden. It only affected that one bed. All the rest of my tomatoes were fine. All the rest of my plants were fine. My peppers were fine. Everything was fine. So at the end of the season, those plants, because they had a virus that was brought in by aphids, I pulled those plants out. I burned them. I did not compost them. And then the next year, I planted that bed full of squash. I didn't want to do tomatoes again, just in case there was still traces of that virus in the soil. And so if you have, like, say, a couple of plants that start looking like this, it may not be Grazon, it may not be herbicide, it could be a virus. But if it is widespread, like I was dealing with here, chances are it is herbicide. So what was happening with my plants is I had these beautiful starts, super healthy, gorgeous plants. I put them in the ground, peppers, tomatoes, and within about 2 days, all of the plants started looking really bad. Like this right here was new growth of a tomato, and you can see how the leaves are just curled up and just looking horrible. They never really form into full normal leaves at all. It just looks like this. Your plant can't survive like this. How is it going to take in light? How is it going to go through, how is photosynthesis going to happen when the leaves look like this? It isn't. The pepper plants, you could really see it too. Like here's a leaf, normal leaf. And this is what they looked like when I put them in the ground, when I put them in the soil. All of the new growth started looking like this. You see how it's wrinkled and lumpy and bumpy? So what is happening is the new leaves, as they grow, the new stems and all of that, the reason it starts twisting and getting bumpy and all this stuff, I mean, it almost looks like it has warts or something, is because the cells, instead of, if you look at a piece of a leaf under a microscope, you see all of these plant cells that are just side by side, all nice in a row, looking all, all pretty and, orderly. What Grazon does is it causes those cells in the new growth to be not orderly. What happens is they start stacking up on top of each other in all sorts of weird places, and that's why the leaves start looking wrinkly and curly and just a mess. That's the first sign that you could have Grazon in your soil or some other kind of herbicide. People ask me if you can test for it. You can probably find a lab to test for it, but the easiest way I think to know if you have contamination is to plant some beans. Legumes, like my little green beans down here, are highly susceptible to the herbicides, and beans grow really, really fast. And there's like 2 different ways you can do it. One way is you can take some of the soil, make a slurry, and then use the water from that slurry to water the beans. And if the beans start dying, then you know it was contaminated. The other way is to simply plant some beans in that soil. And if the first 2 leaves that come up, those starter leaves, and now I can't remember what they're called, it starts with a C. The 2 initial leaves will come up. You might get a pair of true leaves after that, maybe the 3rd. If you get past that 3rd pair of leaves and they still look normal and healthy, you're good to go. But usually what will happen is you get that 3rd pair of leaves, they may begin looking wonky. And then after that, it just goes downhill. So the bean test is a great way to test your soil. I mean, a lot of people have mentioned, and I saw a lot of people say this in the comments, that now anytime they bring in new soil, they bring in new compost before it goes anywhere near the garden, they plant beans in it and test it to make sure it's safe. So that's an option. And that is a way that the home gardener, homesteader could test themselves and make sure their soil is going to be safe that way, as opposed to having to find a lab, sending off samples, the cost involved with that. The bean test is probably the go-to method, I think, for everybody to easily do it. Another thing that a bunch of people suggested or asked me about was, why raised beds? Why do you even use raised beds? Why don't you just do a conventional garden? I'm going to show you why I don't do a conventional garden here. Now, in Alabama, I absolutely could do a conventional garden, but our homestead there in Alabama was built on very old cropland that was Yes, it was clay. Yes, I know clay is full of nutrients. However, when it's hard as concrete and when you till up an entire garden space and you don't see a single worm, that soil was lifeless. And so I started off by building raised beds while I brought that soil back to life. And that's why I had a raised bed garden and a traditional in-ground garden. But here in Arkansas, at least where my homestead is here, there's no tilling up a garden plot. There's no doing a conventional garden. Because what's under my dirt is this. I live in the mountains and we have boulders. There is no doing a traditional garden here. Matter of fact, right here you can see when we had our internet installed and they had to bury a cable going up the driveway, that boulder, this big rock, all of these had to be pulled out of the driveway just to be able to bury the cable for our internet. And that was professionals with professional equipment. So we knew it would be like that when we moved here, so I didn't even bring my tiller. I actually gave my tiller to a friend because I knew I wouldn't be using it. But then another reason also for doing raised beds is they're a little bit up off the ground. And I mean, I'm in my 50s, but I hope to be able to garden for a long time. And raised beds, especially if they're taller raised beds like the ones I had in Alabama, they're easier to work with. You don't have to get down on your knees. You can at least sit on the edge of the garden beds to work, and it's a little easier on the back. So that's another reason. That's another perk to raised beds, and plus having, usually immediately healthy soil that you can garden in right away. Now my beans right here, of course this is not, I did not till for this spot. I simply raked away the wood chips that I had put down, and I just put down some garden soil. And I planted the beans in that garden soil. So the original dirt that was here is underneath that. And so, I might be able to do some beds like this, but as far as doing deep tilling and getting that good loose soil to plant all the things in, that's just not feasible here. So even though this is on the ground, it's still sort of above what was already here because it was added on. And I'm actually going to be doing another bed kind of like this, but built up a little bit more and lined with rocks. Hopefully I'll be able to get to that today because I got in an order of asparagus that I had ordered before I knew about all of this issue with the garden beds. And I need to try and get that planted before, they get wasted. So that brings me to the plan of what I'm going to do about this garden. Well, as you can see from the tub here, I've already pulled out the majority of the plants. I pulled out all of the peppers, all of the tomatoes. Now I just have a couple flowers left to move. All of the flowers and herbs that I had planted, I tried to give them a chance because they were still looking healthy. And so I just transplanted them over here into the ground. And let me tell you, just planting these was not easy because, again, there's rocks everywhere. But I transplanted some cosmos. I transplanted this bee balm. Over there by the wood pile, I transplanted the echinacea, and then I'm still going to transplant these dahlias and the couple of things that I have left in here, like my little rosemary bush that's over there. Now, there are plants that are resistant to graze-on. So, of course, grasses are resistant to graze-on. That's what graze-on's made for, is grass crops. And so, theoretically, I could potentially plant all of these with corn or something like that. Grow the corn, use the corn, pull out all the stalks, and burn them. because over time that could pull the grazon out of the soil. But I don't want to dedicate all of this space to corn. I don't usually grow corn. I mean, I have in the past, but I don't really have the room for it yet. And I want to be able to use these garden beds for other things. And so my plan for today is to begin emptying out these two beds and this bed right here. That bed over there, let's walk over there. This bed over here, I already pulled out the tomatoes. This is kind of where I left off. But I've got zucchini under there. And so far, the zucchini is actually looking very healthy. So I'm going to leave the zucchini in this bed, and I'm going to plant out the rest of the bed with, I think, sunflowers. Because in the reading that I've done, there's a few different ways that people have tried to restore the soil, or remediate the soil. Growing corn is one method. Growing sunflowers is another method. Because those plants will pull it up out of the soil, and then when you pull the plants out, you're pulling the grazon out. And it may take a few seasons for that to happen, but over time that soil will get better and better. And so I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and plant this full of sunflowers. And y'all know I love sunflowers, so it won't break my heart to do that. Leave the zucchini, see what happens with the zucchini. But then the other 3 beds that are in here, I'm replacing the soil. There was a lot of talk about mushrooms, that they break down the grazon and neutralize it. And coincidentally, my son actually grows mushrooms. Well, he just started growing mushrooms this year. And he has some of that leftover mushroom compost. So maybe I can take some of that soil and experiment with that. I mean, I hate that I'm having to spend the money on new soil, but because raised beds initially are an investment. It is a lot of money to start with raised beds, but then after that you just supplement each year with new compost, which, believe me, I will be doing a lot of leaf compost going forward in the future, because I've got lots of leaves, and so I'll be doing a lot of that. But it's just, these raised beds are just costing me more than they should have. And I share about this. I share the problems when it comes to homesteading, because I am a teacher at heart, and I want to share so that other people can learn from it, so that other people can see what happened to me and hopefully avoid it. I had tons of comments in that video about, I never knew this, I never knew anything about grazon, I never knew anything about these herbicides. Oh my goodness, that's what was wrong with my garden. A lot of people who are new gardeners, they thought they were just bad gardeners, didn't realize that they had been sabotaged from the beginning, and they didn't know it. So it is important to share stuff like this so that people can be aware, so that they can watch for the signs of it. Maybe test their soil before they use it. Try it out. Try out the bean test and see what happens. So, we can learn a lot from YouTube. There's good stuff out there that, helps people. So, like I said, I had my moment of pity, self-pity, had my rant, I didn't really cry, but boy, I felt like I could have gotten close there for a little bit. But I've got my boots on, and now it's time to get to work and fix this situation. And this bed right here, like I said, I'm going to plant it out with sunflowers. This can be my experimental bed. Whether I use the other soil or not down the road, I don't know. We may just take the soil from those other beds. We've got a couple spots here on the property that are low-lying spots. They hold a little bit of water. I may just use that to remedy that situation and have this bed right here be the experiment and go from there. But I will keep y'all updated. I'll plant this out with the sunflowers. We'll test it going down the road, and you know, I can share with you the results, and we'll see how long it takes to get that soil usable again. So that is it for today, folks. I'll talk to y'all next time.